What is up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Scyushi and we are back in some more Genshin Impact. Today we're going to be talking about Ayaka because though there's been plenty of leaks of the character as of late, we finally ended up getting an official showcase of the character, which means that I am officially able to finally talk about it because I'm a good boy and I don't spread leaks or anything like that. So without further ado, if you will follow me down this journey, we're going to be talking about Ayaka, and in later videos today, we're going to be talking about Yoimiya and even Seiyu. So first and foremost, this is going to end up being Ayaka's Ascension materials. How you can actually prepare for this character? Well, you can't. As opposed to Kazuha, you know, I ended up having a video similar to this talking about him when he was coming out, and we pretty much had the opportunity of getting all of Kazuha's materials out of the way long before he ended up getting, well, before he even ended up getting launched into the game, right? So we were able to max him out like right away. But here's the difference with Ayaka and the other following characters in Inazuma, is they are going to obviously take Inazuma resources. I'll also have a link in the description to the Ascension materials if you guys want. Now, you will be able to get some stuff prepared, not much though. You will be able to get the ice gem. Obviously, she's going to end up taking the ice gem. You can end up getting that just from fighting world bosses. You can end up getting fragments of the gem, legendary gems, what have you. You should know how that works. And then her talent leveling material is going to be a Blood Jade branch, which is an Ajdaha resource. And the reason why she's going to end up taking a resource from Ajdaha, you might be thinking, well, why isn't she taking something from Inazuma? In the Inazuma update, we are not currently going to be getting a new weekly boss. As far as I know, we're going to have a lot of that stuff coming over time. The developers did end up talking about how the long run plan with Inazuma is when the Inazuma update hits, we're going to end up getting 3 of the islands that were revealed. But there's apparently going to end up being a lot more islands that will slowly end up getting added into the game, which seems pretty cool. Either way, the other materials are as follows. So there's going to be a new plant, which is the Sakura bloom. I'm assuming that's just going to be in the beautiful Sakura forest or something like that. I'm not 100% sure on it. Then there's going to be the Perpetual heart, and this is going to end up being the big boy item to farm. That is probably going to end up being very, very difficult even when Inazuma first comes out, because this is going to be from a new world boss, which, you know how we've got like the ice cube and the pyro cube and stuff like that? Well, actually we have the pyro cube coming with Inazuma. But this is essentially going to be like a mechanical cube. So think Rune Guardians or something to that effect, but mixed with the cubes. And the way that this boss apparently works is it's going to end up, you know, putting up its defenses and summoning a bunch of ads that you're going to have to deal with and kill before it lowers its defenses, and then you can fight it again. From what I've heard, this boss is going to be located deep underground within a giant maze-like area, because one of the big things about Inazuma that's supposed to be so cool is while on the surface, the Inazuma map might not look wholeheartedly impressive. The point of the map is that it is very, very 3D, and by that I mean there's a lot of underground, there's a lot of verticality going on within this area. So that's going to be really, really cool to end up finding this boss and everything like that. But obviously the point is that this Ascension material is going to end up being locked behind this guy, so that's going to end up being very, very tedious to not only find this guy in the first place, but also to end up farming the resource as well. Then there's also going to end up being the old Handguard. A lot of these items might be differently named once the Inazuma update actually goes live. Obviously, I'm using a lot of info that we've seen on Honey Impact, but this is going to end up being an item from the Nobushi enemies, which I assume are these guys, which is essentially the treasure hoarders of Inazuma. And I mean, I cannot wait to fight them just because they look wholeheartedly badass and cool. I mean, what doesn't look cool of Inazuma, right? Oh, and before I forget, the other talent material for Ayaka is going to end up being Teachings of Elegance is what it says. So hopefully the translation on Honey Impact is accurate to when it comes into the full game. But these are basically going to end up being the talent books of Inazuma. So outright, you are not going to be able to prepare for Ayaka before Inazuma is in game. So now let's take a look at some of Ayaka's abilities. More specifically, we're going to be talking about her elemental skill, which the way that this works is it's going to end up summoning a blooming ice to launch nearby enemies, but also deal cryo damage to them as well, which I love anything that has to do with ragdoll, and I think that this just looks really, really cool. Think of it as you know how Kazuha's got his jump in the air and it will end up launching enemies up as well? Or even Venti and his E ability and how it ends up launching enemies up into the air. It's basically that, but it doesn't have the function of launching yourself into the air. And seems like it's going to end up being a pretty useful ability overall, just because of the fact that it's an AoE around yourself, which means that it's really, really useful for getting up close and personal and tagging all of the enemies around you. Now, Ayaka's ultimate ability is going to end up summoning a giant ice circle bubble thing, let's call it. It basically, the closest that this would, I would say, to a relating character that already exists in the game is Diluc. Diluc ends up throwing out a phoenix out forward that ends up obviously, you know, dealing a continued pyro damage to enemies in front in a long trail. And Ayaka is going to end up being very, very similar, where she's going to end up launching a big ball of ice forward. It's not like a snowball or anything like that, but it's basically going to end up just dealing continued cryo damage to enemies around and everything like that, which is really, really cool. Now, you may have already seen some footage here and there about Ayaka's ultimate ability shooting out forward and to the side. That's actually got to do with some of her higher constellations, which we'll get into in a minute, because there's two more things that I wanted to talk about. Not only Ayaka's passive ability, but before we get into her passive abilities, they actually work in tandem with her sprint ability, and her sprint is going to be very similar to how Mona works, where Mona is a character, if you have her or not, basically she turns into a puddle of water and then dashes across the ground. You can actually use this very effectively over water surfaces as well. Ayaka is going to basically be the same thing, but it's going to end up being cryo, which is really freaking cool. It says cloaks herself in a frozen fog that moves with her. In the Sendo form, she moves at high speed on water, and when she appears, the following effects will occur. It'll unleash frigid energies to apply cryo on nearby opponents, which means quite literally you could dash out into the ocean, and then when you come out of your dash, you're going to create an ice platform so that you could potentially end up, you know, dealing some more ice around in the area so that you can get your stamina back, and then you could dash even further. So she's going to end up being probably one of the more useful characters for exploring the open ocean, which isn't going to matter as much because obviously in Inazuma we are going to end up having access to the boats that they ended up introducing in version 1.6, which is the current version that we're rocking right now. And then the other effect of coming out of her ultimate ability is going to cold congeals along Ayaka's blade, infusing her attacks with cryo for a brief period. Which kind of pisses me off, honestly speaking, because I paid good money for my C6 Kazuha to have it so that when I use my abilities, my attacks become infused with animo. And you're telling me that Ayaka gets this for free by coming out of her sprint? I feel ripped off. Okay, so now moving on to Ayaka's passive talents, which I misspoke before by saying that her dash ability was working in tandem with her passive abilities, because that's not actually the case. I'm sorry about the misunderstanding there. But anyways, her passive talent when forging is that when Ayaka crafts weapon ascension materials, she has a 10% chance to receive double the product. So that's actually better than you would think. And then after using her elemental skill, which is her E ability, Ayaka's normal and charged attacks deal 30% increased damage for 6 seconds, which is cool and interesting at the same time, because if you didn't already see Ayaka's charged attack, it looks absolutely beautiful, because her charged attack is literally the anime meme where she doesn't even pull her sword out of the sheath. So the fact that they are kind of forcing her in a way, you know, in a positive way, to end up using her charged attacks a lot more often, I mean, that already alone would end up being really, really powerful. What a lot of single-handed sword users will end up doing is it actually is most beneficial to just use their charge attacks over and over and over again, rather than going for the full 5-hit combo, right? And in this case, or in Ayaka's case, most definitely that already puts her really, really high tier in terms of a single sword user. And then her other passive ability is once she ends up using her ultimate ability and it hits an opponent, Ayaka gains the following effects. She will restore 10 stamina and gain 10% cryo damage bonus for 10 seconds. These passives are cracked, dude. Like, it basically is just damage upon damage. Like, I can't believe that she gets just free damage. But anyways, let's actually move on to her constellations. So for Ayaka's first constellation, it says, when Ayaka's normal attacks deal cryo damage to opponents, that's coming out of her dash so that you have the cryo infusion, it has a 50% chance of decreasing the cooldown of Ayaka's E ability. This effect can occur once every 0.1 seconds, which, I mean, that's pretty darn quick. The cooldown may seem pretty small at 0.3 seconds, but that is, again, just free extra damage overall, because that's going to end up increasing your damage over time, or damage per second, just because of the fact that you can calculate that in with reducing your cooldown and being able to cast your abilities more often. And I mean, that's already really, really crazy. So her C2 makes it so that when Ayaka uses her ultimate ability, it unleashes 2 smaller additional Soken gates, is what they call them. That's pretty much the gigantic ice ball, right? So you're going to end up shooting 2 additional ones out to the side, each dealing 20% of the original damage. So it's 20% extra damage for this one, 20% extra damage for this one, both individual, whereas the main ball or orb in the center is still going to end up dealing 100% of its total damage, right? Her C3 obviously is going to end up increasing her talent level, and then her C4, opponents damaged by Sometsu Soken Gates, which is her ultimate ability's giant orb, right, will have their defense decreased by 30% for 6 seconds, again making her a huge contender for some of the highest damage in the game, just because that alone is already going to end up opening so much more to so many different characters and stuff. I'm sorry I keep scratching my face. I'm kind of growing my beard out and it's really, really itchy, but either way, you can already see the ramifications of that. Her C5, of course, is going to end up increasing her talent level, and then her C6, when Ayaka's cryo damage scores crit hits, her damage is increased by 10% for 3 seconds. This effect can stack up to 5 times and can be triggered once every 0.1 second. So if you can manage to actually get a full stack of 5, that means that that's basically just 50% extra damage. Which, oh my god, I mean, that's obviously when you're dealing cryo, which means that you're gonna be basically sprinting around with her a lot so that you end up getting that cryo infusion. I mean, that's just, whew, yeah, they're really pushing her to end up being a DPS character, aren't they? Oh my god. So yeah, in short, I guess you would mostly end up using her as just a standard DPS character, which is going to end up being basically as follows. For your sands, you're basically going to be going for attack percentage. For your goblet, you're going to be going for cryo damage. I guess you could technically build her towards a physical damage, but I mean, why would you do that? And then for her hat, more than likely, you're going to be using a crit rate or a crit damage one. The artifacts that I would recommend using on her are probably going, well, there's quite a few options actually, because you could actually rock, obviously a 2-piece cryo set is going to be really, really good. But you could end up using a 4-piece as well, which is when a character attacks an opponent affected by cryo, their crit rate is increased by 20. And if the opponent is frozen, their crit rate is increased by an additional 20%, which means that if you ended up going for that set, you could try your best to use absolutely everything else that you could to get yourself the crit damage. So you could have a crit damage hat and then possibly end up using the crit damage one-handed sword that sometimes shows up in the monthly shop. I think that that would be a pretty good combination. Otherwise, if you're just going for a standard 2-2, you would use 2 Cryo, 2 Gladiator. You could also end up using Noblesse, I suppose, if you have her built around her burst, because her burst seems like it's kind of crowd clearing. Or even using a 4-piece Gladiator, I guess. I don't think it would scale as well as a 4-piece Cryo, but I mean, time will tell. We'll have to wait and see, because we already know that when Inazuma ends up coming out, there's going to end up being some new domains that will end up having new artifacts, which are more than likely going to be very, very fine-tuned for the new characters that are coming out, right? So a lot of the stuff that we have right now, though, yes, you could technically end up just throwing it onto Ayaka and being okay with it. Generally speaking, you're probably going to be farming the new domain like a crazy person in order to end up getting those other artifact sets that are going to work better with her. But we'll save that for another video. That pretty much is going to cover it. I'm not going to hit you guys with any damage calculations today. I'm sorry, but I'm actually in quite a rush to get these videos out to you guys today, talking about each of these characters. And I feel like since Ayaka's gonna be the big one that a lot of people are gonna be focusing on, I had to go into a lot more detail about her, and also just fresh off of the developer live stream. But as far as I'm concerned, maybe I'll end up wishing for Ayaka, but honestly speaking, I might wish on the weapon banner instead, which hopefully I end up getting lucky on it. It depends which weapon shows up, because there is a certain katana weapon I know that's coming into the game which looks ungodly powerful, and looks like it would end up being a lot better for your boy Kazuha, because as of right now I'm using his 5-star master elemental mastery sword, which I mean, it is technically seeming to be his best in slot, but I still kind of really want to push this guy to his absolute limit. And the sword that I'm talking about in particular, I don't necessarily want to talk about in detail, whoopsie daisy, because I don't know whether or not that's going to be in Ayaka's weapon banner or Yoimiya's weapon banner afterwards. We'll just have to wait and see. Either way, it is a very exciting time to be a Genshin player. It only took them like a year, but we're finally going to be getting Inazuma, and I am wholeheartedly excited, dude. That's going to be in like 2 weeks. Less than 2 weeks, right? Oh my god, that's so exciting. Either way, I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, smash like, sub for more, buy the merch you want to support the channel, and have yourselves a fantastically wonderful day, gamers. Good luck on your pulls when Ayaka gets into the game. I don't know whether or not I'm gonna wish for her yet. I would love to, except I already spent way too much money on Kazuha.